everyone. Babula and I are back with you for another Astro update. And Babula, I have to say that I am so glad that June is finished. I want to shut that door. Eclipse coming up, which you'll tell us about, but man, when that's over, I'm thinking I just hope it's a little bit of a breather and have some smooth sailing for a while.
Yes, well, it is less intense in July, but there are some things to speak about for sure. But yeah, June was a doozy, and I saw a post on Facebook just a few days ago, something like, congratulations everyone, you made it through June. Now you're at the 7th level of Jumanji and get ready for the next level. And it's kind of a bit like that. We are in a kind of a Jumanji experience, aren't we?
Yeah, I saw a meme too that said something like, congratulations for making it through the first half of the year of 2020 and buckle up for the second half.
That's right. Because yeah, I mean, we knew from the beginning of the year, of course, with that all those strong conjunctions in Capricorn, that was setting the year off on a very powerful trajectory of incredible change and a watershed. But then when we look through the whole year, we'll go, oh, okay, and there's this and there's this and this. So it's a sort of an ongoing series of events and movements astrologically, and every month has its sort of flavour.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what's coming up for us in July? Well, I think so far we've had, what was it? Was it just Wednesday this week we had Saturn move back into Capricorn?
That's right. That's right. So Saturn has now, it got up into those early couple of degrees of Aquarius, came out of Capricorn where it's been for a good 2 years, just slipped into Aquarius for about 3 months, turned retrograde, is now just moved back into Capricorn. So he's not quite finished with that story now, and he's going to remain in Capricorn now until around mid-December, where he'll come out of Capricorn for good, well, for 30 years anyway, 28, 29 years. So his return back into Capricorn means he's moving back now into the same territory again as Pluto and Saturn, and actually gets quite close to them in the next months. But it's, it's already showing up in the sense of, some parts of the world are seeing what they're calling, the second wave, new layers of restrictions and constraints, and we're seeing governments, many governments all over the world, passing quite restrictive laws and measures, which many people agree with, many people don't. And this is very Saturn in Capricorn. It can be the necessary constraints that are required to deal with the reality of a situation, but it can also be authority and that the power bases overstepping the mark, like Big Brother run amok kind of thing. That's right. And it's like day after day, go, whoa, it's just more tightening, more constraints. I mean, a lot of Australia's opening up again, which is fabulous, but there's one state that, of course, that's not. And yeah, so Saturn to me is the master of tough reality. And no matter what is the source or the cause of circumstances that we find ourselves in with Saturn, basically the voice of Saturn says, well, this is what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Whatever the cause or the source or how we feel about it, this is how it is right now. A spiritual teacher of mine used to use, it always made me chuckle because I think he made the word up. He used to speak about the facticity of the matter. I think it is, I love it. I think it's a made up word, but that's very Saturn to me. This is simply how it is.
Yes. And
we can agree with it and go along with it and think it's a really good thing, or we can buck against it and go, I don't like this. Because for those of us who have put a high value on freedom and autonomy, this can feel like yeah, don't know about that, sort of thing. And for others, it's with Saturn, sometimes it can feel like we want those boundaries and constraints because it feels safer. So that's often the issue around Saturn. Even in our own birth chart, we all have Saturn somewhere. Saturn was somewhere when we were all born, and it's in our chart somewhere. And that's when we're always, that part of our life is where we're constantly working through issues around, these are my obligations and responsibilities. This is the fact of the matter. These are the things I have to deal with. But there can also be levels of anxiety and fear and worry about our security.
Yeah.
And when we're really worrying about security and survival, it's very base chakra stuff, Saturn,
Yeah.
then we can sometimes give up certain freedoms because of our anxieties about our security. It's a kind of an interesting,
It's like a trade-off, isn't it?
it's like a trade-off, and it can be quite a dilemma in many ways for many people. So, and Saturn and Capricorn, certainly one of the things they govern is the government, the laws, the rules, the courts, the police, the parents, the archetype of the parent, the headmaster, the person in charge, the person of authority, and the one who sets the rules and then sets up the punishment if we don't obey the rules. And so we can feel afraid, we don't want to do the wrong thing because we're afraid of what might happen, either from, say, a pandemic or from the government. You see, so these are very Saturnian issues, and they're not easy. Saturn never makes things easy for us. It's
Don't I know it?
Yeah,
I've got Saturn on my sun.
Yes, that's right. And so the whole journey then is, and I'm having a Saturn transit to my moon this year, and so there are certain constraints and challenges that we simply have to face and work with, and there's many levels and layers of that process of working with, and coming to terms with, and like, can we, in the midst of certain constraints, still find our own autonomy and individuality and freedom? Like, is there space within that, or are we simply just feeling like completely squashed?
Yeah, that's usually when I put my Aquarian hat on and just leave.
Right. That's right. Because what happens, with Saturn, sometimes when Saturn's sort of coming down quite strongly, it can just go, oh, this is all too hard, I'm out of here. Or we push against it, or we just bow down to it and go, okay, I'll do what you say.
Yeah.
Because I can't see any other option.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he does not make things, it's that thing of, stuck between what do they call it, a rock and a hard place.
So that was on Wednesday.
Yeah, so he's now back in Capricorn until mid-December, when he will leave Capricorn and not return to Capricorn for another 29 years or so, and then he'll move into Aquarius, and that will be quite a change of energy. And he leaves Capricorn with Jupiter as well. So that's a big story, which we'll talk about closer to the time.
I bet all the Capricorns will be going, yay!
I know. Oh, that's right. There's a sense of pressure, and we know many people are really struggling through this situation, really struggling and having all sorts of very real challenges. Saturn is very pragmatic, very realistic. It hits us around our work, our material survival. Can I pay the mortgage? Can I feed my children? Can I pay the rent? Have I just lost my job? Did I get the benefits from the government because I lost my job, or didn't I? What am I going to do? This is very Saturnian matters. Yeah. So it's a strong theme for this. And of course, because Saturn in Capricorn's been operating with Jupiter and Pluto, you know, the year started with this very potent and powerful Saturn-Pluto conjunction. It doesn't get any stronger than that, Saturn conjunct Pluto.
Mm,
You know,
mm.
so, and now he's kind of moving back into that realm where he, you know, gets very close to Jupiter and Pluto again in the next few months. So, yeah, it ain't over yet, really. But one thing with Saturn, one thing I love about Saturn, I used to always resent Saturn, but I've come to appreciate him. He's a teacher,
Yeah.
and he teaches us how to survive even when things are difficult, how to draw on our own inner wisdom and knowing and inner strength. It's like a planet of grit. You know, we can tough it out. We can grit. Yeah, I can do without that. I can do without that. I don't need that. I don't need that. If I focus on this, then I can move forward and build on that. So he kind of strips things back to the bare bones.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing frivolous or extravagant about Saturn at all.
Yeah.
And there's tremendous wisdom and maturity and integrity. And I think another really important thing I want to say before we move on and look at other things is that this is also a planet that's about authority. And I think this is a really other big key thing here with this emphasis on Capricorn this year is, are we only listening to external authority, or are we tuning into our own inner, and I'll use the phrase God-given inner authority to, you know, the word sovereignty comes to mind, like to get really clear about there are external authorities, and that's okay, that's required to a certain extent. And then there's our own. And that sense of inner authority and autonomy and wisdom only comes with time and age, actually.
Mm.
Most young people don't have a lot of it unless they're very Capricornian or Saturnian, and then they're kind of born with it.
Yeah.
You know?
And I found when I was working as a clinical hypnotherapist, people would come to me with issues around putting up their boundaries.
Yes.
And that's very similar to what you're talking about, because in the first chakra, because that's sovereignty, that's your right to be here, your personal rights, your God-given rights.
Yes.
To be on the planet and to survive like everybody else. You have the same right, you know.
That's right.
So sovereignty would come up, but people who struggle with that would be people whose boundaries have been pushed, like you're talking about with Saturn in Capricorn. Our boundaries are being pushed, and
they are.
Yeah,
they absolutely are. It's very much a planet of boundaries, for sure. And that's why Saturnian Capricorn people really value boundaries. You know, like in nature, the sign and planet govern things like rock and stone and walls and, you know, buildings and mountains, and, you know, it's kind of strong, solid structures and forms, and our own personal energetic boundaries. Are they strong? Are they clear? Are they kind of weak and easily broken and easily, yeah, and really open and porous, for example? And we're sort of all over the place. So he gives us, like, it literally rules the bones in our body.
Mm.
And I always feel Saturn gives us a backbone.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
Gives us that sense of inner strength. It's really important. So there's a lot we can say. Like, astrologers have written entire books just about Saturn. There's so many things we can say. It's a very, very important planet.
Mm.
And he never lets us off lightly. He says, yeah, you'll get there, but you're going to have to work for it.
Yeah.
You're going to have to go through some stuff first, and then you'll get that, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't just get handed to us on a plate.
No, but that's how we learn to appreciate what we achieve, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. And, you know, and appreciate what we have, even if a lot's being stripped away. We get much clearer about what's really of value and what's really worth appreciating, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's quite serious. It's a serious energy.
Yeah. Very sober.
Very sober. That's a good word for him. He goes, yes, correct. Correct.
Correct.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I mean business here. This is for real.
Yes, exactly. Sounds like a father, because Saturn can represent
That's right.
fathers too, can't it?
Absolutely. That's right. Yeah.
Or can it represent a dominant parent as well? If
Yes,
there's
it can.
no male. Yeah.
Because whoever was the strong kind of lawmaker in the family, or the one who, often it's that old thing of, wait till your father gets home. but or it can be the mother. It doesn't have to be the father. In our culture, because it's a patriarchal culture, it's often the father. Some fathers don't want that position. Some fathers, some men are not that way inclined at all, but the mother might be. So a very Saturnian Capricornian mother can be the rule maker and the one who dishes out well, sometimes it can be seen as a punishment, but it's also, and these are the consequences. I asked you not to do that and you've done it, these are the consequences.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Life is full of consequences.
Rats.
I know. Yeah.
Oh, so what have we got coming up then?
Okay, so I think the next important thing is that on July the 5th, we do these lovely talks around the new and full moon. We have the full moon, and I've been out in the early evening going for walks and seeing the moon, and I love that stage when we're in the second half of the cycle. When you watch her every night, she just gets bigger and bigger. So she's growing in size. And so on the 5th, we have the full moon at 13 degrees of Capricorn. So the sun is in Cancer, and the moon will be in opposition to the sun at her fullness in Capricorn. So it's a Cancer-Capricorn polarity at 13 degrees for those who know their chart and like to sort of track these things. Now, every new and full moon is important because these are important monthly cycles, but of course this one is the third lunar eclipse in a series of 3 eclipses. So every 6 months we have 2 or 3 eclipses in a row, new moon, full moon, new moon, or full moon, new moon, full moon. And so we've had a full moon eclipse, we've had a new moon eclipse, and now we're about to have the third across this Cancer-Capricorn axis at 13 degrees. Now, the signs that are opposite each other are really interesting. They kind of work together as a pair of opposites. They're very strongly connected as a polarity. Cancer is a feminine sign. It's very much about nurturing the mother principle. And it's very soft energy. We think, and it's ruled by the moon, we think of the moonlight, walking along a beautiful beach under the moonlight, and everything's kind of in this beautiful soft glow, of the moon, and it can feel very almost transcendental. And then Capricorn on the opposite polarity is more like the parent, the systems and the structures and the organizations, both in our own world personally, but in the world itself. And they're very different. Capricorn is strong and purposeful and worldly and hardworking, and sometimes can be quite stern and doesn't want to show emotional vulnerability. And Cancer's over here being all soft and vulnerable and emotional and nurturing and caregiving, and and it's the mother and child sort of energy. But what they have in common, signs opposite each other look so different, but they are connected very strongly. This is the polarity of the parent, the mother-father sort of polarity. And it's also around, sometimes we have to be really strong and definite, and sometimes we're really kind of soft and nurturing. And both signs share a very strong sense of security. The United States is a Cancerian country. In fact, they have their birthday every 4th of July, and their birthday this time is going to be on this full moon eclipse.
Mm.
right on their sun. And, you know, it's a very, you know, so countries that are Cancerian like this, you know, are more sort of emotional by nature, like the phrase homeland security, you know, is very, very Cancerian, you know, wanting to protect what's close and near. That's why, like, the mother will do almost anything to protect her child, and this sense of closeness and protection we have around our loved ones and those near and dear to us in our personal sphere. You know, whereas Capricorn is more like that parent who goes out to work and earns the money and succeeds in the world and perhaps isn't at home all that often, while the Cancerian parent doesn't really want to go out to work.
Yeah.
Would rather stay home and you know, run the household and take. I've known Cancerian men whose wives go out to work because that's what they want to do, and they stay home and they take care of the home front. They do the cooking, they do the washing, they look after the children because that's where they'd rather be, and that's what's natural to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a couple like that too.
That's right.
Yeah. And they do a good job.
That's right, because that's natural to them. They're naturally inclined and they have the capacity for that. Yeah. Yeah, and yet the woman might be the one who needs to go out there and have her career. And so I love it that people these days can feel free to do what works.
And thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
I mean, what's the point of doing something that doesn't work for you? You know, it makes for an unhappy household, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So that's another important piece. So we're still in eclipse season, and when the eclipses are going on, life is always pretty intense, and there's a lot of things going on in the world arena. But I mean, it seems like this entire year, like every day, there are big things going on in the world, and you know, it's like the world has now just become one thing, and there's just so much happening, and you know, every day there's a new announcement, there's a new development, there's this going on over here and this drama going on over there and so on.
China's flooding.
Is it? I haven't heard that one.
Yes, there's lots of flooding and tornadoes going on in China, which shouldn't be surprising because the last eclipse was in Cancer, I think you said, yeah. And I've often noticed that when there's a lunar eclipse in a water sign, there's always lots of water.
Lots of water. That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so you will often get big earth events and weather events and things because the energy just gets very, and because the moon, and this is a lunar eclipse, it's about the full moon, the moon governs our tides.
Yeah.
And the waters in our body and our hormones and emotions and but in nature, when we're having a full moon, like nature is just like she just is so strong, you know, and animals feel it, the plants feel it, you know, nature is alive with this pulse of life strongly. And at the new moon, there's a kind of a quietening down, and then it builds to this full moon energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, tides are moving, you know, the waters are moving, and yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this lunar eclipse in Capricorn is a south node eclipse.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I've been reading up, you see.
Excellent. That's right. That's right. So the moon, then, you know, the moon, the south node's now just gone back into Gemini, but it's still, eclipses happen when the sun and the moon line up with the nodes. So the moon of this eclipse is near the south node, not the north node. So that brings that kind of, and the south node is very much about the past. By the way, Capricorn and Cancer both have a strong sort of attachment to the past. They love history. Like in Cancer, we're interested in family history, you know, and do all that ancestry.com and want to know all the family stories and where do I belong, where did I come from. And Capricorn has a natural fascination for the past and the traditions of the past and history, and also indigenous traditions and traditional medicine and knowledge and, you know, and these sort of things. So the past is a strong theme, but when you get that south node connected to Cancer, I'd say one of the themes there is, you know, we have to look at our emotional attachments. And there can be a lot going on for people in their families now. I mean, I'm certainly seeing that. You know, there's been a big change in the circumstances of my children's father. You know, he's older than I am, and he's going into a whole new, you know, phase of his life. And so the whole family, myself included, is sort of engaged with this new development and new situation. So it really affects our personal world, you know, and all of the things that might bring up from the past.
Yeah. That's interesting. Because my dad passed away last year, but I've found very recently, in just the last few days, I've had a lot of more grief come up about that.
Yes.
So that's, yeah, I didn't sort of have time to grieve about that in the past, but
right,
I guess, and I'm wondering whether that's related to that, or maybe because Saturn's moved into Capricorn.
I think it's around that eclipse energy because the moon, the lunar eclipse full moon, is on the south node. That's about letting go, you know, and releasing and shedding, because they have a tendency in Cancer Capricorn to want to hold on to something. You know, we get attached. Particularly in Cancer, there's this strong emotional attachment to the past. And that south node to this eclipse is very much about, you know, releasing that and going through whatever feelings we need to support that happening. So, you know, memories, moon, Cancer, very much about memories, because it's about our sense of belonging and connection and families. No matter what our family background and situation has been and is currently, we can't deny this kind of connection to blood family, you know, whether it's a positive one or not.
Yeah. So if we're thinking on that and mulling over that, does that somehow bring in the Mercury retrograde?
Yes, good point, because the Sun and Mercury are in Cancer. We're in the Cancerian time of the year.
Yeah.
For sure. And Mercury is retrograding in Cancer. So that takes us back into memories of the past, and it brings those things forward, because when Mercury goes retrograde, going forward, then back we go. And in the sign, you know, in the sign of Cancer, we're looking back into past. We're going over things. Things are coming up, or communications are going on in our very personal sphere, you know, in the personal realm, very much.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So that's interesting that you're experiencing that, you know, those old things. And for me, even with my ex-husband, who is the father of my children, you know, we haven't been together for a long time, but we've stayed connected, and we've kind of held this sense of family connection through all of these years, and the family all get together for certain birthdays and Christmas, and so we've kept that going, which is a beautiful thing. Both he and I have a moon in Cancer, perhaps that's why.
Yeah.
And it's just been natural. It hasn't been a big effort. It's just natural. And so for me, just on reflection, it's like, yeah, kind of looking back at my relationship with him and where I'm at now, and my heart just feels so tender towards him. You know, and you know, he's sort of coming towards the end of his life. We don't know how long that is, whether it's months or years. You can never know, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just feel really, really tender, and know that there's a soul connection no matter what the circumstances were. Yeah. So this is very much the Cancerian theme. You know, our loved ones, our personal world, our home, our family, and all those issues around that. And look, even just on really simple level, like, it's a great time to be just, you know, we're in the winter solstice time. It's Cancer, it's winter, southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
This is a perfect time to be cozying in, making your home really nice, working in the garden, just, really bringing some lovely juice and energy to your home and your personal world.
Yeah, yeah. I'm finding I'm going through that too with the establishing the backyard veggie garden and officially becoming, city backyard farmers, and just bought a bread maker after many years of doing without, and wanting to go back and do all those self-sufficiency things which I used to do years ago, like make my own soap and like laundry liquid and dry fruit and veg and store those. And I don't know, maybe it's some of that first chakra stuff, the need to survive into the future. I don't know.
Well, as you say that, that's true, because I think what you're describing there is a beautiful expression of Cancer and Capricorn. Because Capricorn says you can do this and you can survive and thrive with far less than you think you actually need. That's very Capricorn. It's very Saturn. You don't need that. You don't need that. You don't. And if we look back at our parents and grandparents, I mean, I was very fortunate to have many generations of grandparents in my life as a child, and I remember the stories and visiting them, and like they went through all these depressions and all these difficult times, and they made do with so little.
Yes.
And we are so indulged. We are so spoiled. We are so excessive in the way we live, and the Saturnian consequences of that are just what's happening with, the natural world. We're just stripping it bare.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is very Cancer Capricorn to me, like bring it back home, how to survive and do really well with a lot less, and learn how to do these very practical things that are actually also very fulfilling, aren't they?
Yes, to recapture our natural survival skills.
That's right.
And our natural self-sufficiency skills, which I think is innate to us. And when you start, when I chopped out some bamboo the other day, and I thought, well, I won't chuck that. I'll keep that because I can use that and make a trellis for my tomatoes that I'm putting in. So it's also looking about what can I recycle rather than what can I go out and buy new.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's very Capricorn. That's Capricorn at its best, because it's a conservative energy. But when you look at the word conservative, it's to conserve. How to conserve and preserve.
Yeah, which reminds me, I'm making jam soon.
There you go. That's brilliant. And Cancer is absolutely the kitchen and food and cooking and providing not only food as sustenance, but it's that sense of love, the pleasure. Like I worked in restaurants for many years and have been around chefs and known chefs, and I love, we talked about this last time, I love watching the cooking shows and so on. And you will find most people who work with food will have strong Cancerian energy in their chart. It's such a natural thing.
Interesting, isn't it?
It's really interesting.
We're so guided by the energies in the universe, and I'm just thinking that, I've really come, since I've been doing these shows with you, it's really, I've come to appreciate that more and more and how deep that goes. And it's like astrology is like opening up the back of an old analog clock, and you see everything, the big cogs and the little cogs and the smaller ones again, and they're all linked to make the clock work, and that's just what astrology is all about.
It is. And there's a very old clock tower somewhere in Europe. God, I can't remember. Is it Brussels or Switzerland, somewhere like that? It's still there and it still works. Very old, it's very large, and that's what it's got. It's got all these cogs and circles, and it's like, because that's how astrology works with the planets. It cycles within cycles within cycles as they're all moving around like clockwork, which is very Capricorn, by the way. Capricorns love clocks.
Yeah.
They love clocks.
Of course, when you have a year like 2020, it's more, even though it seems apocalyptic, there's still those cycles. But, like all of us were thrown into the washing machine at the beginning of the year, and we're in the cycle, the wash. And then it got a little bit easier as it moved back into Aquarius. So it's in the rinse, not as bad.
That's right.
And June is with the eclipses is like we've gone into the spin cycle.
Absolutely. Oh.
I'm thinking after July the 5th, we're going to be hung out to dry.
I think we might be.
Yeah.
I know. It's just massive year, and there's more developments on their way. So
yes. So what happens after that?
Now Mercury will turn direct. So Mercury's retrograde now, and I'm sure many of the people watching this will be familiar with that. For those who aren't, 3 times a year Mercury turns and goes retrograde. It's usually around 21 days. And commonly what we experience is a certain degree of, mayhem and chaos and confusion around communication, messages, appointments. We get forgetful, we turn up at the appointment at the wrong time. We write the wrong time or date in our diary, and or we just forget things. But it's really a time very much when our thinking kind of goes back into the past. We're processing retrograde, we're returning, we're revising, we're rediscovering, we're going back. And then when it moves forward again, which will on July the 12th, there's a sense of, you'll sort of feel it, there's a sense of, a kind of a release as that energy slowly starts to move forward again. You feel like, I can sort of think clearly again. It can often feel like that. I often joke and say Mercury retrograde is often expensive, because in my experience it often is, because very often equipment, computers, the phone, your washing machine, the car, you get mechanical problems, equipment breaks down, or things stop working, or you get a speeding ticket when you're normally really careful, and there are traffic incidences, and it often does cost money when Mercury goes retrograde. Yeah.
Now, just a question about the Mercury retrograde. When we're going forward, because Mercury is all about the way we're thinking too, isn't it?
Yes.
So we're sort of thinking, I guess, outwardly about what's going on and what's coming up, etc. But when it goes retrograde, do we sort of go more internal then, if we go back into the past?
Yes, it is more internal, and especially in Cancer. It is absolutely more internalized, and we're sort of ruminating and going back over things, and we're remembering things, and we're perhaps having conversations with family members, and there might be tricky conversations that are coming up with family members. Yeah, or there might be some tricky issues that we're working with people that we're really close to. But it can also be a fantastic time to clear the air with somebody, and I think a good question to ask if we're having a conversation with someone, it's perhaps a little tricky, say, look, I'm not sure that if I'm communicating this really well, do you see what I'm saying? And if not, ask me more questions so that we can both get on the same page and at least hear each other properly. Because often in communication, we don't always hear each other properly. And when we read something, whether it's in an email or a text or on social media, we just go into sort of automatic knee-jerk reaction, and we haven't actually read it really carefully, just kind of jump to a conclusion really fast. And I think Mercury retrograde is a really good time to go, okay, I'm having a reaction. Let me stop and reread this again, and even come back the next day and read it again. And we'll often find, okay, I was overreacting. I was kind of interpreting this, and I wasn't really seeing what was being spoken. And then if you're not sure, you can go back to the person and saying, look, what were you really trying to say here? It's Mercury retrograde's like that.
Yeah. Get some clarity around it.
Get some clarity, because miscommunication is a big thing in human.
It's the word. It's the biggest thing. It's
huge. Yeah. And in Cancer, it can get really emotional. It's a water sign, and it gets very personal. We can feel really offended and feel really sensitive and kind of assume something that may not have been intended.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. But it's Mercury retrograde's fantastic for research.
Good to know.
It really is really good for kind of using your mind kind of behind the scenes, and then when it goes forward, we're ready to, Like I always say to people, don't launch something new when Mercury's retrograde, and don't do it the day after it goes direct. Give it a week or two to get moving, for the energy for it to pick up speed a bit and kind of really get going. And then, like if somebody wanted to, I can't tell you the number of times elections take place in the middle of Mercury retrogrades. And I think these people obviously know nothing about astrology. Like the Queensland state election in October, smack in the middle of Mercury retrograde. So, you know, like things can just go quite haywire. It's not the best time.
Yeah.
You know, if they knew of these things, they would wait for it to go direct again.
Yeah. The tricks of the trade.
Tricks of the trade. Like don't sign important documents when he's retrograde, or make important financial decisions. And if you really have to, just be very thorough. Don't rush. Take your time. Get it checked, double checked by somebody else, because you're going to read the same mistake every time and not realise that you're seeing the same mistake, you know.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
Double check, double check, double check. And then if you really have to go ahead with this thing, do it, but know that you've done the best you can.
Yeah, yeah. Good advice. So what happens to us after July the 5th?
So then...
12th, was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then we have another new moon, which we will talk about closer to the time, still in Cancer. So this month we're getting 2 new moons in Cancer, and that's because we have 13 lunar cycles in a year, but only 12 months. So every year there is 1 month where we'll get 2 new moons in the same sign. So we had the new moon eclipse at 0 Cancer, then there'll be the new moon at 28. And that's what we call the blue moon, and people kind of like to put a whole lot of esoteric meaning onto what a blue moon is, but really all it really is just that month there are 2 moon cycles in the same sign.
Yeah, because the month is a bit longer than 29 days.
That's right. So, you know, the timing doesn't quite fit. So, but look, the other thing I want to speak about is that Mars is now in Aries. And I forget the day. Oh, here we go, June the 28th. So it's only like about a week ago. On June the 28th, Mars, which in mythology he's the god of war, he's the warrior. It's a very masculine energy. You know, the symbol for Mars, the circle with the arrow pointing up diagonally, even in science, is the symbol for masculine, for male energy. So Mars is a masculine energy. Its energy is male in the sense that, like, when I say that, the very best of that is like masculine energy when it's functioning really, really well, and when Mars is functioning really well, and we've all got Mars somewhere in our chart, helps us to be direct, straightforward, take action, make decisions, stand up for ourselves when we need to, push back when we need to. At its worst, Mars is the aggressive, violent, dominating bully who just lives to fight. You know, so every planet and sign has its different expressions, and some are positive and some are not so. So I always like to consider all of it. So with Mars now very strongly in his own sign, because Mars rules Aries, and he's going to be in Aries until early January. And normally Mars is in a sign for only 2 months. This time he's going to be in his own sign for 6 months.
Ooh.
And when a planet's in its own sign, it's extra strong. It's like, it's okay, here it is. I'm home. I'm in my own place. I can just fully be who I am. And so Mars is a planet of action and doing and decision making, and its energy is always just like that. And straightforward and let's go. And so to people who are born with quite strong Mars energy, it's like a fiery energy. And Aries is a fire sign. And it helps us to make decisions and initiate new things and give birth to new things. And it energizes us. You know, it's hot and it rules in the body the blood and the red blood cells and the muscles. And like a lot of competitive athletes will have a strong Mars, for example. People who are drawn to the military will have a strong Mars or Aries emphasis in their chart. Yeah. People who are highly independent, you know, Aries Mars says, don't tell me what to do, got to do my own thing. Just step out of my way, I'm coming through. You know, it's that sort of an energy. So we're in for quite a strong, feisty, fiery time now with Mars strong in its own sign. And in September, October, it's going to go retrograde for 10 weeks into November in Aries. So it's going to be very strong, and that can stir up for us frustration, anger, irritation, confrontation, aggression. We might find ourselves just feeling really frustrated and really angry. And, you know, we can look at that as we go on, because during this whole 6 month period, Mars is going to join up with certain planets and, you know, trigger things. And on the world stage, particularly during the retrograde phase, we can see real flare-ups of conflict and confrontation and outbursts of, you know, anger and aggression and so on, and rebellion and so on. So,
we've seen a lot of that already.
We have.
Yeah, and I'm thinking when you were talking about that, about what's been happening in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'm just wondering, do you happen to know the chart for Hong Kong? Like,
I do, but I haven't looked at it for a while. When it was all going on, like last year, I was closely following that astrologically, and I haven't looked at it for some months. But yes, absolutely. And so, you know, Mars in Aries really does govern the military and war and weapons and so on, and using the kind of brute force of that energy to control and to dominate, you know. So I mean, the military has its role and its place and its function, but of course it can also be used in highly oppressive ways, as we know. And the war machine in the world is an enormous industry. It's huge. So there's all sorts of agendas going on there. So
yes, I can think of a few.
So, you know, I think always with these things, we look at it in the world and the collective field, but we all have to look at it always, you know, what is that for me here inside of me and in my personal life? You know, and so this is where, you know, working with an individual chart comes in. So each of us are going to be experiencing that in our own particular way. And some of us have quite strong Mars energy and some of us won't have strong Mars energy. So we can feel very intimidated and really frightened of it. You know?
There was one more thing I wanted to ask you too before we finish up. Was I was reading that on July 11 that Chiron goes retrograde. Is that right?
It does. Yes, it does. In fact, that's the same day that Mercury turns direct again. So you've got these two planets at sort of at this standstill, changing direction. And Chiron is going to turn retrograde in Aries, which is now where Mars is, in Aries. And the Black Moon Lilith is also in Aries. So there's, you know, I'm going to run a series of online classes all about Mars and Aries, because I had intended to do this even last year. I knew I was going to do this year, but in person here at home. Now it'll be online, because I could see this was going to be an important theme.
Right.
2020, particularly in the second half of the year, because I want to really address all of that, you know. And so Chiron now turning the wounded healer and the medicine man and the shamanic energy is turning backwards in the sign of Aries. By the way, it'll be in Aries for many years, but as Mars starts to move forwards into Aries, and they're going to meet in a while, and then we've got the Black Moon in Aries too, and so Mars will touch that. So
okay.
So it can be sort of you know, things can fire up. Now, I really want to emphasize, for many people, this can be a really positive thing. You know, because Mars, if we're feeling stuck, Mars can really ignite new passion, new enthusiasm. Can actually, if we're feeling stuck and confused, suddenly we just get decisive. We go, I know what I need to do, and we just go for it. That the phrase "go for it."
Yep.
Very Mars Aries. So it can be an incredibly positive energy as well to move us forward.
Yeah, it's like activating.
Activating, exactly. So it's not something that we need to go, oh my God, I'm scared now about, you know, this Mars energy. It can be extremely helpful in many ways, but absolutely it can really trigger, you know, war and conflict and aggression and so on.
So many things to be mindful of.
I know, but, you know, the world is in such turmoil. There's so much happening but it's just interesting to me that, you know, Mars is going to be an important piece of the story this year. Yeah.
Much to cogitate on.
Much to cogitate on.
Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure again.
Yes, thank you so much. It's very, very educational, enlightening. Gets my spidey senses all going.
It's great.
Okay.
Well, I just really hope it's helpful for people,
Yeah.
you know, to help us understand and put things into context a little bit, and, you know, help sort of explain, oh, that's what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, that fits, you know, and that,
Yeah, I always think that human beings can cope with anything if they understand why it's happening.
I agree with you. I agree. And it's our curious mind, like, oh, what's that about? You know, what's that? And if we understand it, the mind does want to understand.
Yeah, it's the not knowing that can create fear about things too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl.
And we'll be back in 2 weeks, everyone, to talk about the next non-apocalyptic times. I'm hoping we'll have a little bit of ease for a few months. And get on with life.
Get on with, that's right. That's because life continues, doesn't it? Day after day, moment by moment. There's still so much beauty and gloriousness to experience, regardless of all that stuff that's going on.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.